Now when you're doing your rigging, there's quite a lot of stuff that you're going to need. I mean, apart from the fact you're going to need some pulleys, well, you know, some of them are supplied in the kit. I've bought some wood ones. We'll talk more about those later. But just your basic necessities, even if you're just not worrying about the pulleys and just rigging, is you'll need at least 2 dark and 2 light. So you'll need preferably black or a very dark brown, and then a tan or a beige colour. And you'll need them in various sizes. Now, this is my biggest black. It's about a 0.5 millimetre, and that will only get used for the mainstays, which are some of the strongest ropes on the boat, as opposed to the anchor ropes. Now, the anchor ropes will be the strongest, but they will be the beige colour. Now, the reason is the mainstays, which hold the masts in place at the lowest level, they're covered in tar, right? They never move. They're fixed. We're going to make one shortly. They're black. The rope that runs down to the anchors is, you know, modern ships would say an anchor chain, but in these sailing ships they actually run a cord, a line of very, very strong. Now I've got this one here which I've sort of used on this kit. Is not really wide enough. I probably needed 1 millimetre. Now there was some supply by Revell, but it wasn't nearly enough to, you see the pick, to wind around the windlass, which is the winch that drops the anchor. And so I've sort of cheated and fudged a bit, and I've used this. It's a little bit narrow, right? It's only 0.5, but still there are points that you're going to need. 0.5 running rigging, and you know this is running rigging because it doesn't have tar on it. These are ropes that are going to wear out. These are ropes that move and thrash about, so they don't want tar on them because that would just get in the way and get stripped off. So the sizes I've got are, this one's about a 0.1.5, nearly a 0.2. This was supplied in the kit. Okay, this is a bit of the standing rigging, the fixed rigging. And I'd use these on the thinner lines that run on the top of the masts. And I'll also use it for the channels that ran up the rat lines. I probably could have gone for a slightly wider one for the channels. Well, the channels, the shrouds, really. The shrouds, the channels, the bits at the bottom. There's so many nautical terms to remember. These were the lines that run up your rat lines, right? Your rat lines have vertical lines and horizontal lines. We've talked about that a lot. Show you more later. But the vertical lines on the rat lines, they probably could be a little bit thicker. I probably could have gone with this one. But unfortunately, I couldn't get a black in an intermediate size. So this is 0.25. I couldn't get a black. It's rising. My local hobby store and everywhere I sourced, and even I bought this one online. It's supposed to be a dark, you know, a dark cotton reel, which I assume would be close to black, where it's really more like a brown. Once it's on the model, it doesn't look much different, so I probably could have used it. So this will get used for things like secondary stays, like we're going to do a preventer stay shortly, and some of the stays that run up. So as you go up the boat, the lower stays will be the thickest one you've got, thickest tarred line. Then you'll get minor stays, the middle stays with that. And then you'll get up to things that run right to the top, like all the shrouds, the rat lines do run to the top. You end up with the thinner, or your thinnest black. So you get this graduation, and you don't have to do it. You could rig the whole ship just with those two, and that would be okay. But I wanted it to look a little more accurate, and I really wanted to try this whole graduation thing. So I've used the thick to medium to thin black cotton as I worked up the model and needed less and less strength to hold things in place. And it does look nice. It does look nice, I must say. Similarly, you've got your running rigging here, right? So I use some of the thinner ones here to do some cordage and ties, and you'll see that in a sec to tie things off. We'll also use it on the very top sails. They'll get done in. The sails themselves were tied on with this, so I've used that quite a lot for doing all the minor tying. Some of the middle sails are going to get tied on with this. That'll get tied on with that. And if I need some really long, heavy lines with the running rigging, such as maybe to the bowsprit, I'll use the thicker one. So again, you graduate depending on how much force is involved. If it's only a little sail and a short line, well, you need a little rope. And if it's a little mast and it doesn't really need a lot of line to it, you need a thin one, you know. But if you've got a big fat mast or a big huge sail, you're going to need a thicker rope. Okay. And you can dismiss all that. As I said, just use those. That's fine. Or some people just don't even bother, just rig the whole thing in white cotton. Fine, whichever way you want to go. Now some tools. I've got a selection here, so I'll just run through them one by one. I've got these tweezers, or possibly they're called sutures, I don't know. Some people call them different other things. Suture clamp. Basically, you let it go and it holds in place. Unlike a normal tweezer, when you let it go, it springs apart. This is the opposite. So it's really handy to grab a line, hold it, and then you can do something else. I'll show you how I use that shortly when we tie a pulley. You'll need your hobby knife, of course. Put a brand new blade in so it's nice and sharp. You'll need some nippers. Now, I keep these just for doing things like wire and for cutting basically line. I keep them sharp, but they're not the ones I use on plastic. I keep a special Meng set just for plastic. These are just mine for mucking around doing things. And that way I can get in there with a file and sharpen it if I need to. I'm not worried about too accurate a cut as long as it cuts clean. I've got some angled tweezers. It's kind of handy for like sneaking around things and pulling out a line. They become very useful. I've got my normal tweezers that I'm very used to and very happy with. So most of my rigging and pulling and everything, I'll use these. You'll need a pin vise and a drill because you'll need to drill holes. You'll need to, well, drill holes, that's what it's for. Yes, you'll need to drill holes maybe in the hull if you've got to add a little cleat or a loop and you want to drill out your deadeyes. They're very useful indeed. And then I've got this tricky thing, which I haven't really used much, but we'll try and use it in this video. And it again is another one that you can lock. So you open it up, it's got a little mouth, right? And you can lock. So it should be handy, especially once we get into the running rigging, for reaching in past everything and then grabbing a grabbing a line, pulling it through. So that's the basic tools that I'm going to use to rig my ship in all the next videos, and this one as well, and the various cords that I will use, or various cottons and the various lines. Okay, well, let's get on with rigging a deadeye. This is what we're going to attempt to rig. It looks a little bit complicated, doesn't it? It's actually not that hard. Not that hard at all. And this is used for the mainstay, right, and the preventer stay, which hold that main mast in place on our Bounty. And I've already done the main stay here, and I secured it to the bow. So it's already, I've done all this arrangement. Here's a photo. Okay, so that's all done. So we're going to make the preventer stay now, which is slightly narrower, but it still uses the same attachment, okay? I'll still need this. Now up the top here, that's all I've done there is done a simple loop and a knot. It's not that complicated. Okay, so that one was easy. Anybody would tie that. Down here, well, this is just going to tie off to the mast. Now, you could not bother with this. You could just run a line from the top of the mast here, just above the fighting platform, and you can run it down and you can loop it around the bottom of the foremast here, and you're done. Okay, and that's, as a kid, that's all I used to do. But I'm really trying to learn these knots and these ties and the way this cordage is sort of tightened up and raveled, and it's all kinds of fascinating terms. I'm probably using them all wrong, but we're going to make one of these. Now, what are we going to need? Well, this rope here, for all intents and purposes, I'm going to use my second thickest dark cotton. Okay, so that's my 0.25. I'm going to use that. I already used a 0.5 here to make the mainstay. So my preventer stay is slightly smaller, so I'll use this one. I'll need to be able to tie it up. Okay, I'll need to have all these things fastened in place. So I will use my thinnest of my basically tarred black cotton, and that will tie that. And then I need to build this thing in the middle here, which goes between two deadeyes. And I need two deadeyes. I've got them there. I haven't quite got the right ones. I needed the heart-shaped ones with a single hole, but I couldn't find them for love of money. I couldn't buy them. It wasn't until I purchased these, and I'm just about finished rigging this model, that I actually found a supplier that does these tiny little heart-shaped deadeyes that only have the single hole. So I'll use that on my next fill. So when I do the Batavia or any of those other ships, I know where to get them now, at least in this scale. Actually, they're probably slightly over scale. I'd say these are more like 1/75th or 1/50th scale. But it's all you can get, and, well, it's all I could get anyway. And getting a lot smaller is going to be a lot fiddlier and, very hard to use. Don't worry about that. We tend to do model ships in slightly over scale pulleys a lot of the time, especially if they're smaller scales, like this is 110 scale. And you can get even smaller ones. You can get little 5mm ones, but well, look, they're a little bit too small for my eyes to cope with, so I'm staying with these ones. And and you can be forgiven too if you're using slightly larger sort of tackle blocks, pulleys, deadeyes, than would actually be to scale. The fact that you're actually putting them on makes the model look really good, so don't worry at all. Okay, so how do we make one of these? Okay, well, we'll make this little loop first. Okay, so what we'll need is, I need to work out length. Well, I've already had a look at my model, so I already know I've measured out that we've got a nice bird song there today. It's better than all the other horrible songs I keep hearing. So I've got plenty of this, so I'm just going to measure off a length that gives me plenty to work with. And what I need to do is, I've got to create this business. So dividing it in half, okay, and remembering this is going to pretty well sit hard up against the mast. I'm building this little part here. That there is that there. So I've got plenty here to tie with. I'll need to get my fat fingers around everything and do it, okay? So one of the very first things you'll do with your Deadeye is you'll need to check you've actually got holes, and that's where your pin vise and your drill bit come in. Now, to do the rigging, I've been using Aqua here. This is just a white wood glue, and I believe there's like an Elmer's and there's a few other type of glues that you get in America and around the world. It's just a white wood glue, okay? So whatever you would glue wood together with, it's white, it dries clear, that's what you want. And you'll need a nice, brand new, nice and sharp toothpick, okay? No scummy old one you're picking out all those bloody chicken bits out of your mouth with. No. Or in the case of Bassa cat, fish. No. You're going to need a very clean one of these. All right, so first I'll get some of that glue ready over here, and then we'll start trying to put this pulley together. Now, the bit that I'm using in this is 0.5mm, and that's been constant all through this model. When I've drilled holes to put cleats in, or loops, eye hooks and things like that, I've used this, and I've used it consistently to basically clean out and check. I've also used it on other Deadeyes when I've done the put the rat lines through, and I've used actually the Deadeyes on the model, the plastic ones supplied by Revell. I use this same drill bit. Now, you wouldn't put 0.5mm cotton through a 0.5mm hole. It won't fit because you get ferries, right? There's always ferries. But a 0.15mm diameter cotton, that'll fit through. It'll get through. You might even get away with a 0.4mm drill bit. But honestly, you need at least double or a bit more than the diameter of the cotton in your drill bit and your hole to actually feed it through. And that's because of all the irregularities and the furries around. And by furries, I mean there's always stray little threads popping through. You can't see them, they're invisible, little furries. You can wax the lines, and I do things like that, I'll show you shortly, to make them easier to thread. Because even this cotton, just as it is, can sometimes be so furry that it's hard to get all the way through the holes. All right, let's tie this up and create a Deadeye that is rigged to go as a stay. Now, if I had the right Deadeye here, I'd only have a single hole, but I've got 3 holes, so I'll just do the principles involved in what you do with a 3-hole pulley. Now, if you have a look at the drawing, even though it's better focus there, it's going to point to the top, okay? And then it's going to have lines pulling at the bottom. So what you want to find is you want to find where it's symmetrical. So it was pointed top like that, those bottom lines are all wonky. You may not want that. Just fiddly little bastards, these things. So that one's a bit horrible. So really the one I want, oops, hang on. The one I want is there. Okay. You see there I'm going to have, if I make that my top and that my base, okay, so there's a base to it and it goes up to a top. It's supposed to be a heart shape. That's going to give me an even run of the lines out of there. Now, I wouldn't have to worry about this if I'd actually got the right bloody pulleys, but unfortunately these are the only Deadeyes that I could get. All right, so knowing that, I now know I need glue on those 2 sides. So I won't do it how I do it, I'll do it so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I need glue. I'm going to need to basically draw my heart up that way. Okay, so what I do is with my toothpick, I will now get tagged on my cotton. I'll now run in that little channel. See, these Deadeyes have got little channels on the side of them. That's how the whole thing works. I will put a bit of this glue into there. You don't have to worry too much if you slop it. Admittedly, we're only using tiny amounts, but you want it in the hole. Okay. So now we'll thread our cotton through. So we've got half and half. Okay, and I'm going to pull it into that channel. See that channel? And then I'm going to twist it onto the glue. Alright. Now I didn't bother to put glue on the end there. I found that that actually makes it too hard if you've got glue there when you start. You could. You may be better than me, but that's how I do it. So basically now I want them to hold. I want that to hold together. Had a few minutes now so that the glue is fairly dry. It's at least tacky on my Deadeye, so it makes it a lot easier to get the work done. I've got my 0.15, my thinnest diameter cotton out, and I've cut a fair amount. You always need a lot more than what the actual size is. You know, triple it, because there's a lot of waste in rigging. There's a lot of waste because you really need plenty of thread to work with. All right, so I'm going to do some binding around here. So simply I put that around the back and I'll just tie a very basic reef knot. Okay, over and under, right, over, under, and through. Okay. Now, it gets a bit floppy and wobbly and it's a bit hard to do tying. So what I found is an easy way to make a jig. So I've got basically my little click-on guys here, and what I do is I put a round file in there, and then what I do is I take my pulley and I stick one of the holes into the round file. And the reason being there's a lot of friction. Right? So as you can see, it's a bit floppy now. It's a bit floppier than what I want. So what I'll do is drop this down, and I can also use my little clampy tweezers to hold the brown thread. All right. So now not only have I got it sitting up so it's easier to look at, I've got some tension on the line. Okay, I should have done that to start with. All right, now I can really have a look at this because it's getting a little bit out of whack. So I really need that knot right up in there. There we go. That's choked it right up into place. Got it. Okay. It is a week or so since I last did one of these. I've nearly forgotten the method. It's really not that hard. Okay, so we're going to need a few. We'll probably need about 4 or 5 of these knots. I know what's going off camera. Such a tiny thing to try and show you. So I'm just merely trying to keep that as tight as possible. So having a little jig is making it a lot easier. Oh, there's the midday plane. Where's that one coming from? I think it was from Bali. So there's all the people that've been to Bali who were hung over from the bintang. Oh dear. Okay, we're there, right? So it's basically now tied. Okay, so what we need to do is secure that, and this is where the white glue comes in handy again, is that a dollop of white glue on there is going to lock that knot in place. You don't need much. I probably put far too much on. So if you've got far too much on, what you need is a cotton bud, and just take the excess off. Either way, it's going to dry clear, so I wouldn't worry. And it's a good time to make sure everything's nice and tight. So I definitely want that hard up against there. Yep, I think we're there. Okay, we'll let that dry now, and then we can cut off the excess lines. But we've got part one done of our Deadeye. This is, it's round the block and it's tied off. Our white glue is nearly dry, but it's tacky enough now that we can get in and cut away the excess. And this is where I use my nippers. And I find it's best to get the line reasonably tight, at least up and out the way. And this is how I cut all. And get in close, but don't cut the knot. Just cut and you're away. As easy as that, okay? So again, keep it sort of still. And this applies all through the model, all through the rigging. Don't get in too close, you'll cut the knot, right? So always, so that you're basically resting up against what's there, and cut. And now, that line is exactly how it should be. So what will happen now is there'll be a mast. So if you can imagine this this paintbrush is the mast. We'll tie it in a sec. Okay, so the paintbrush here is the mast, and we'll tie it off against there. And that's all this one is. It's as simple as that. Alright, so that just ties off like so. Very simple. Now we'll need to do the lines that run out of the Deadeye, but to do that we've got to make the other one. So let's do that now. I'll make that one a bit quicker. You should be able to see the same principles again, and we'll do it a bit in speeded up motion. Now the reason I've left these little pieces on there was A, so that I didn't have a big long piece of cotton in the way while I'm trying to tie those other knots, because as you saw, when you've got a big long bit of cotton in the way, it gets very confusing. But also, just in case I need to tighten them again or I need to adjust anything, I've got that bit there. And also if I cut too close before the glue dries, it would all unravel. Now the glue has dried, I can cut those off. So again, only getting as close as I need. And this way, hopefully the knots shouldn't unravel because they've had time to set. And I'm staying well outside. It doesn't even matter if there's a tiny little bit of thread sticking there, it all adds to the realism. Alright, they're all trimmed. They took a bit of trimming off camera so I could really see what I was doing. Now the long one here, well, you don't want it that long. You'll want it just to have a little bit left over, we'll say there. Get that nice trim. I really need to sharpen these bloody nippers. They've come out. And then the whole thing needs to be finally sealed off with a bit of the white glue. It's easier if the pulley's working from the centre. Here we go. Now I can pull it nice and straight. There we go. Alright, we now need to lash these two together, these two deadeyes, right? I've got to have some cordage put between them. So I've used the thinnest of my brown cord, my tan cord, and I've tried to defur the end by dipping a bit of glue in it and then squeezing with my fingers, so hopefully that should go straight through that hole. There wasn't a big cat hair in the way, so that should go straight through there. Yep, no trouble at all. Draw that through. Now to join to my other pulley, it's have to come up the corresponding hole. So I need to go into there. Okay, so that go into there. I don't know if you can see this. Alright, so that goes into there. Move that out of the way. Okay, so then this line goes over the top and will go into the next hole. Just that one there. So that comes through, and now that will go into the underside again. So you've got to have your wits about you here, know what you're doing next. So into the underside, that hole there. Pull that through. Okay. So it's all lining up nicely. See, it's lining up nicely. You're getting the effect. Alright, we've got a couple of the lines in. Now we've got to get the third one in. But unfortunately, that's where my my file there is blocking the hole. That's okay, we can just switch that across. I'll switch that across to one of the one we've already done, which will help hold it in place. Find my line. And my line is now going to need to go across and into the bottom of here. Across the top, and I've got that spacing set before, and then it's going to go down into that hole. And I can confirm that I've got the right length by using my brush again that I'm using as my spacer. Okay, I've got my brush in there now. I'm trying to hold everything so it doesn't collapse. That is correct. So that's what I want. Okay. So now I'll tie that off before I get this whole thing comes unraveled. Okay, well I need to go off camera to tie that final knot, which I've done there. But basically that's done, okay? So we have a line coming out of each of the holes in the deadeye. Now this would be a lot easier if you had the deadeye that's just a single hole. You just run them through, loop, 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 loop. You could you'd probably put your toothbrush, not your toothbrush, your paintbrush between them, and away you go. So that's sort of how it's done. Ideally it should have a lot more lines than that. But that's all I'm going to do because I'm fed up. That's all I need. It'll look fine. Okay, next we tie this off to the mast. So finally, after all that, we've got our two little deadeye pulleys there ready to go. tied, lashed together, and they are going to fit from the bottom of that mast there, the foremast, and they're going to run up and into the fighting platform there. Now you might notice something new. This is a base. This is a wooden base here that I got for the Bounty, and I've put some pedestals on. And this is essential at this point when you're doing your rigging, unless you have the whole thing sort of very secure, and so that you can pull on a cord without the whole thing falling over on your table, or you've got to have your model so that it's not going to wobble and fall over. So that's why I've put the pedestals on and I've added the base. All right, let's just tie this off, because this is probably the easiest thing we're going to do today. So we just need to know the position. So if I check my diagram and have a look, it actually ties on quite high, actually, because it ties on the same position that the mainstay goes. The preventer stay sits slightly above that, so it's quite high on the mast, actually. All right, so we'll tie that off now. And having lots and lots and lots, like making that really long, is paying off now, because it's so much easier to get in there and get my fat fingers round. Now the reason we're doing this first before we put in the rat lines, okay, I've already got rat lines over here, is because once rat lines are in, you can't get your fingers in. So you need to do your fixed rigging first. You need to do your standing rigging first. Get all those in. One thing, it'll hold all your masts in a fixed position. It'll straighten up everything. You can get the whole model lined up, so all your masts are lined up and they're sitting at the angles you want. So once you've done that, then you add your rat lines over the top. You can try to do the other way, but invariably you're just making your life very difficult. Okay, so I want to probably go up a bit to about there. We're going to compete with the aeroplanes out there. So, yep, that's a spot right there. This one's fairly easy because it just ties right on that mast. So, you can see there's the mainstay, and then this is just tying right on the mast there. Okay, just above the mainstay, just so we've got a little bit of difference between them. And I've got my glue all ready to go. So I'm going to put a little dollop there. Pull this nice and tight. It's got to sit correctly. And then I can run my cords around. Try and imitate the bound line that really should be there. But there's no way I'm doing all that binding. You gotta be joking. So I'll just run it around and tie it off. And so not having the rat lines in there makes this so much easier. You would be really fighting and screaming and yelling. Well, I would be. Pull Basticator right the ring. Right, that's it. That's tied off correctly. Easy as that. Okay, so again, so you can see what I'm seeing. See, that's going to sit there nicely, and they should be sideways like that. All right, so that'll be good. And next, this comes up into the fighting platform. Now, it always comes up from underneath. It goes through one of these little holes. Admittedly, if I'd have done this before I put the rat lines in over there, that's not too bad. Okay, so it comes in there through one of those little holes. Okay, then it goes round the back of the mainmast. They always tie to the back one. You don't tie to the front one. Let me show you again. Keep it over so you can see what I'm on about. There's a front one and a back one. Well, the front one doesn't have much strength at that point. It's really, that's where it's going to pivot. The back one is really strong because it's already basically locked off here. It's locked off with rat lines, and it's locked off round down here to the base of the ship. So it's the strongest mast. That's the one you tie off. Tie off the other one, the bloody thing would snap. Okay, so that's now needs to go through and round. Okay. And the only reason I've got rat lines there and I've broken my rules is that I was getting a lot of work done on this before I got a chance to do the video, because I haven't been very well, so I haven't really been able to find time to do the video for you until today. We had some fires here and we had massive dust storms, and it brought on my bronchitis. I've had bronchitis for quite some time. So I had a bit of a bronchitis attack, or bronchial attack. Have you imagined acid on steroids? Yes, that's what it was like. It was horrible. Couldn't breathe, suffering. Okay, so I've gone up, through, round the back and down. Now all I need to do, I've got to keep it on the top of the other line. So I've got to go over the top. Right, all I've got to do now is pretty well the same as I did with the previous stay. Okay, so again I'll try and tip it so you can see. Got two lines there now. And I'm just going to do the same sort of knot arrangement there. Now I've got to get this reasonably tight because I want my pulleys to pull up. I want my pulleys to be doing their job. So they need to pull up. Okay, so what I need to do now is it's just a simple knot. Now if you knew how to do a truckie's knot here, that would be something that would be very useful, because you've got to pull this thing up on itself. I don't particularly know truckie's knots. Well, I did once. This is bloody Sea Scouts. Now look, I've got a big furry end here, which is making it really difficult for me to thread. So that's where your nippers are coming in handy, and I sharpened it. While we're waiting for everything to dry, I've sharpened it. Oh, it's my stomach crumbling. Time for a curry. Through. Sorry this video's sort of gone on for so long, but that's just the nature of what we're trying to achieve here. Okay, so that's got to be tight. That's got to pull through there. That's got to tighten up along there. Nearly got it. So this whole thing's got to have a lot of tightness, a lot of tension. So I've got enough tension in this line. Yes, I have. There it is. Right, so that's it. It's tense. My pulleys have pulled up nice and tight. That's not too bad at all, actually. It's not too bad at all. I'll, you know, if you get it, and then you don't play with it. So that's it. What I do now is make sure that that's locked off, again, with a dollop of white glue. You notice this white glue looks really blobby when you put it on, but it always soaks in and it disappears. And it dries clear. And anyhow, you need a good size knot there, because in the real one that would be tied off against itself, and well, it would have binding on it or something like that. It would be a very strong knot. Okay, so that's exactly where that should be. Alright, and that's the safety stay, okay, preventer stay. Now there are lots more lines we can put on here. There's all kinds of crow's feet and everything put on. We're not going to do that. This is it. So I'll let that dry, cut that off, and then basically that's all of my stays in place. My fixed rigging, my standing rigging is done, and I'll be able to, well, apart from these rat lines, I'll be able to, in the next video, finally show you how to attach those rat lines. Okay, so that's about it for this video. So that's all we did. We made one rigging line, okay, and once that's dry, I'll trim it off. We'll come back in the next video and I'll show you a lot of things that I've done to the ship since then, and we'll finally do the rat lines through here. All right, that's it. It's goodbye from Australia, and it's hooroo from Harry Houdini.